In London, a group of Luftwaffe bombers evades flak guns and drops bombs on the city. Below, a mother rushes her children to a bomb shelter, including her son Edmund, who foolishly stands by an open window. Edmund runs back into the house to retrieve a portrait of his father, an RAF pilot, and nearly gets himself and his brother killed before making it into the shelter. The next day, Mrs. Pevensey takes her children, Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy, to an evacuation train at Paddington Station. They are headed to the town of Combe Halt, where they will stay with Professor Diggory Kirk. Upon arriving at Combe Halt, the children are met by Mrs. Macready, the housekeeper, who tells them that the professor is unaccustomed to having children in his house. The estate is like a museum, filled with historical artifacts, and the children are warned not to touch anything or disturb the professor. The first few days on the estate are tense for the siblings. Edmund is a troublemaker, Lucy is homesick, Peter feels the weight of being the man of the family, and Susan is always trying to be smart. The weather is terrible, and the children are forced to stay indoors. Lucy suggests a game of hide and seek, and while playing, she discovers an unused room with a large wardrobe. She climbs inside and discovers that she can keep going deeper and deeper until she emerges into a snow-covered woodland. In the wood, Lucy encounters a faun named Tumnus, who is delighted to meet her. He reveals that Lucy is a human, which is important in his world, called Narnia. Tumnus invites Lucy to his home for tea and crumpets, where he reveals that Narnia has not seen Christmas or any season except winter in the last 100 years. Tumnus plays a hypnotic tune on a flute-like instrument, and Lucy sees shapes of a man riding a unicorn and other creatures. As Lucy enjoys her time with Tumnus, her siblings become increasingly worried about her. Lucy returns, her siblings do not believe her story about Narnia, and they all go to bed. The next morning, Lucy takes Edmund to Narnia to prove that she is telling the truth. There, they meet the White Witch, Tilda Swinton, who claims to be the Queen of Narnia. She is kind to Edmund but tells him that she hates all humans. The siblings eventually make their way to Narnia, where they learn about the prophecy of the Four Thrones and the return of Aslan, the true king of Narnia. Edmund has left the beaver's house and gone hiking towards two mountain peaks. The others try to follow but arrive only in time to see Edmund entering a very large palace, seemingly constructed of ice and stone. Peter tries to follow, but the male beaver stops him, saying that Edmund is the bait for a trap. When the palace doors close on Edmund, Susan and Peter argue about whether they should have gone back long before that, but Lucy, saying, "Only Aslan can help your brother now," so Peter asks the beavers to lead them to Aslan. Edmund, in the palace, is in a courtyard seemingly full of stone masonry statuary. Then he tries to step over a sleeping wolf who rouses himself with great speed and pounces on Edmund, challenging him for identification. Edmund says who he is, and the wolf condescendingly leads Edmund to an obvious throne room where Edmund cannot resist sitting on the throne. Queen Jadis finds him sitting in it, and at first, she does not reprimand him for such lèse-majesté. Instead, she first asks whether his sisters are deaf, and whether his brother is unintelligent, and then loudly demands to know how he dares return alone. Now sounding not very beguiling at all, but talking clearly for the first time, she frightens him into revealing that his brother and sisters are in the beaver's house. Edmund then asks whether he could have more Turkish delight, and Jadis summons Ginnerbrick, who leads Edmund away at knife point to a prison cell. Then she summons the wolf, who is actually Mogrim, the police captain, or rather, the alpha dog of a pack of wolves, who now rush out of the palace, intending to raid the beaver's house. At the house, the beavers hurriedly pack some supplies, and then the three children and two beavers escape into a tunnel just as Mogrim and his pack invade the house. The five emerge into another clearing where they find the stone statue of a badger, which the two beavers recognize as once a buddy of the male beavers. The children realize at once that they are looking at a real badger, once able to talk as the beavers are but now petrified. Nor is he the only such sad creature whom they find. "This is what becomes of those who cross the witch," says a fox who offers to hide them up a tree while he sends Mogrim and his pack off on a fool's errand. After the wolf pack runs away, following the fox's false lead, the fox allows the female beaver to tend to him only briefly while he informs the party that Aslan himself has asked him to go. Peter notices another implication of Father Christmas' message. The great river they must cross, supposed to be frozen, will not be frozen much longer. They arrive at the fort of Baruna and find the river thawing. Desperately, the children and the beavers try to cross on what little ice remains, but Mogrim and his pack catch up with them. Mogrim's beta pounces on the male beaver, while Mogrim taunts Peter and Susan, saying, "This isn't your war. All my queen wants is for you to leave." Mogrim might or might not have noticed that the rest of his pack is no longer able to support him because the ice, breaking up, is already carrying them downriver and away from the fight. Then, before Peter can make up his mind, the nearby waterfall thaws the rest of the way, and its ice covering breaks. Peter drives his sword into the ice and orders them all to hold on to him. Then the ice dam collapses, scattering the wolves and washing the five fugitives down the river. Almost by a miracle, they survive and manage to get safely across. They notice that they can shed their coats because now the snow is melting fast, and the nearby trees are putting out their first buds and leaves of spring. Behind them, Jadis arrives to find a running waterfall. Mogrim and his pack arrive, dragging the fox who had deceived them earlier. Edmund, hoping to spare the fox's life, reveals the Frey stone table and that Aslan has an army. To his horror, Jadis strikes the fox with her scepter, and a horrid blue electric flame leaps from the scepter, washing over the fox and petrifying him. That is how she must have killed all those unfortunates in the courtyard. Jadis slaps Edmund, telling him to remember whose side he is on. Then she orders Maugrim to muster those creatures faithful to her at an undetermined place, and declares, if it's a war Aslan wants, it's a war he shall get. The beavers lead the children straight into a medieval war camp, complete with brightly colored officers' tents, and all manner of wondrous creatures preparing armor and weapons for themselves. The fascinated children see centaurs, moor fawns, satyrs, and griffins, a kind of flying creature, part avian, part mammalian. Susan wonders what everyone is staring at, and Lucy says, they probably think you look funny. But the onlookers are not looking at the children with curiosity but with reverence and awe, reserved for kings and queens. The children still do not understand the significance of this attitude. Peter walks up to the obvious command tent, draws his sword, and says, we have come to see Aslan. Then everyone kneels to the ground, and the command tent flap opens. The children meet Aslan, lean to face. Aslan is a very large lion, who truly walks like the king of beasts. Aslan bids the three welcome, thanks the beavers for their good guidance, and then asks after Edmund. Peter shocks the assembly by saying that Edmund was captured. The beaver shocks them further by saying that Edmund had betrayed them. Aslan quiets the assembly, and then Peter confesses that he is at least partly to blame for being too hard on Edmund. Edmund is their brother, and they want him back on any terms. Aslan sympathizes, though he warns them that the situation is now very difficult. Later, Peter, now dressed in the leather jerkin of a medieval officer, talks frankly with Aslan about it that instant. Later that night, Oreus, having followed Maugrim's miserable beta back to Jadis' camp, leads a successful raid to rescue Edmund. The next morning, Aslan talks to Edmund alone about what he has done, and then reintroduces Edmund to his siblings, telling them there is no need to speak about what is past. Peter and his sisters are glad enough to have Edmund back, and are quite satisfied that Aslan has asked all the questions that need asking. The four children then have a serious conference. Peter wants to send his three siblings back to the lamppost and the wardrobe, while he stays and leads Aslan's troops in the coming battle. But Lucy insists that the Free Narnians need all four of them to win, and Edmund will not walk away from a situation that he helped create. Susan, the last holdout, then takes up her bow and arrows to get in some practice. All four of them practice their combat techniques, Susan with her bow and arrow, Lucy with her dagger, and Peter and Edmund learning the proper way to ride a horse while holding a drawn sword, sword point up, and even how to fight while on horseback. Then the male beaver alerts them all that Jadis has demanded a parley with Aslan and is coming to the camp. Jadis demands Edmund's surrender or Narnia will be destroyed. Aslan talks to Jadis alone and she renounces her claim. Jadis asks about Aslan's promise, and he roars his answer. That night, Aslan walks toward the stone table, and Susan and Lucy want to go with him, but he tells them to wait and trust him. Aslan is executed by Jadis, and her forces withdraw. Susan and Lucy stand guard over Aslan's body all night. The next morning, a dryad wakes Peter and Edmund to tell them of Aslan's death. Edmund encourages Peter to lead, and Oreus asks for his orders, which Peter gives. Later, Peter, now dressed in the leather jerkin of a medieval officer, talks frankly with Aslan about it that instant. Aslan, Susan, and Lucy arrived at Jadis' palace, which was totally unguarded. Lucy saw the petrified Tumnus and burst into tears, but then Aslan breathed upon Tumnus and revived him. Peter fights with Jade but he is no match. Aslan arrives at the last minute, which amazes the witch. Because she had killed him at the stone tables, it is then revealed that the scriptures says whether will be presented on the stone table as a sacrifice but without blame will resurrect. Lol. Aslan outsmarted Jade. Aslan then swallows Jade to end her rude reigning.